Well, hello, everyone. This is Dr. Ron Klatz, president and founder of the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. The A4M is the world's largest professional international medical society, medical education organization that has brought the concept of preventive medicine, advanced preventive medicine, functional medicine, healthy aging, happy aging, basically has put forth the position that aging is not inevitable and that our notions of aging are passe. We live in an amazing time. We live in a time of miracles in healthcare, and the diseases of aging are in fact treatable, and some are already reversible. And we believe one day all will be reversible, and that people can live a much longer, much healthier, much more youthful lifespan to age 120, perhaps 150. Having said that, our academy, which now numbers over 30,000 physicians and scientists in 130 countries around the world, is happy to produce this segment of Immortality Now. And we have two special guests. Carol Petersen, RPH, is a research and compounding pharmacist who has over 30 years experience in the field, knows almost everyone, has seen everything, and likes to taste what's new and exciting from many of the new manufacturers and the new technologies, and is just an incredible resource. And we have as our guest today, well, Carol, tell us about our guest.
It's my pleasure, and welcome to Immortality Now, Dr. Rosensweet. Just a little bit of background. Dr. Rosensweet is the founder of the Menopause Method, and he's written a book, Happy, Healthy Hormones. He's spent a good part of his career working with bioidentical hormones, which is a particular passion of mine. And he's also become a very important spearhead for a coalition for compounded bioidentical hormones. Dr. Rosensweet, welcome to the show. And please maybe fill in your background a little bit more for us and tell us why this is so important and why A4M practitioners really need to know about it and become a part of it. Thank you. Go ahead.
Nice to see you both, for sure. I became a holistic medical doctor in 1968 and certainly discovered A4M along the way and had the privilege of teaching there. Dr. Wright and I used to teach about treating men and women in menopause for several years. And I think my credential, considering the opening, is I'm 79. And I'm telling you, I got a lot of good systems running at me, especially the ones that you probably care most about. And I've specialized in treating women in menopause with compounded bioidenticals for 25 years. I decided to hone in and do that. And because of that, I had a lot of connections and started teaching, and eventually was invited 2 years ago by the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine to present to their ad hoc committee on the efficacy and safety of bioidentical hormones. And at first I had about 5 moments of excitement, followed by a lot of skepticism when I noticed they didn't have one prescriber, anyone who's ever written a prescription for bioidentical hormones or compounded one, on the committee. And I immediately started requesting being on the committee, which they didn't. And the committee meeting was very interesting.
Dr. Rosensweet, just for our audience who may not be aware of the difference between bioidentical hormones and typical hormones, not too many of them, but there are some people out there. Maybe you could just briefly go into the difference, just 10 seconds, 20 seconds worth.
Sure. Women have been treated in menopause with hormones, and men also in andropause, for 1,000 years. And about in the 1950s, the pharmaceutical manufacturers started extracting urine from pregnant mares because it was a source of a lot of urine and a lot of hormones, because these hormones show up in the urine. And they crafted 2 pills, Premarin, pregnant mare urine, and Prempro, And these things were enormously popular. They were the most profitable and popular drugs of all times up until a Women's Health Initiative study falsely reported out erroneous results in 2002. Up until 2002, there was 18 million American women being treated with hormones, primarily Premarin and Prempro, 40% of American women in menopause, and then it dropped to the very, very low millions. In the 1980s, under the direction of a great pharmacist, Jim Hernser, and a medical doctor, Jonathan Wright, who's spoken many times at A4M, they thought, why don't we do bioidentical hormones? Why don't we get the same molecule? They're out there, they're accessible, and they did. And pharmacists started putting these molecularly identical estradiol, estriol, testosterone, DHEA, progesterone into topical creams, and which is the optimal way to deliver these hormones. And bioidentical hormones were born in the early 1980s. And by the time that there was some recovery from the disaster of 2002, there's about 6 million American women alone on hormones in the United States now. It dropped to the very low millions. There was 18 million. And over half of them, by a medical study in 2017, are on compounded bioidentical hormones. Tremendously popular for a lot of different reasons.
So you can jump back to where you were. You were talking about NASEM, but let's proceed that with why this committee even exists. Why was there a committee formed to look at compounded bioidentical hormones?
Very touchy subject.
Oh,
I'm a big tent fellow. I'd like everyone to thrive. I'm not against anybody. But I think the catastrophic event that was the ultimate origin of this committee was in 2002, the market share of the pharmaceutical manufacturers with the most popular and profitable drug of all time went so low, it was ridiculous. And then by the time everyone woke up, compounded bioidentical pharmacists were dispensing over half of the prescriptions in the world. And, you know, I hate to say it, but I think it's a market share issue. And meanwhile, in the early 2000s, well, 2008, there started to be these challenges arise. And a citizen did a report saying that estriol in the common estrogen bias was not okay and should not be done. It was a citizen complaint. Turned out the citizen was not a citizen. It was a pharmaceutical manufacturer. It was found to do that.
It's funny the way so many of those quote unquote anonymous complaints seem to have a financial or a political bias to them.
Yeah, can we say names? Actually, it was Wyeth, and Wyeth indeed sold estriol in Europe unfettered, but they didn't apply for it in the US, and they didn't want anybody else doing it either. So as a citizen's petition. So they rather functionally prevailed, maybe about 70% prevailed.
Well, what happened in 2008 is American women rose up in the thousands and thousands and thousands, started writing their Congress people, and it looked like the FDA was going to turn back and allow estriol. In fact, they did. But in an end around, these are very skillful people. There were so many restrictions and financial penalties applied to compounding bioidentical hormone pharmacists that it made it far more difficult for people to stay in business. And they became one of the most regulated and controlled. And Carol, you know so much more about this. Please chime in if you do. But the estriol was turned back, and you know, this was not the end game. They achieved a lot in the process. And then, I guess it was about 3 or 4 years ago, the FDA again started rising up and wanted to challenge bioidenticals. And I think it's to be noted, and again, I'm so uncomfortable about this because this is the United States of America, and we're supposed to have integrity and freedom and free economy, and that's not what's happening here. I mean, the FDA receives the majority of its funding through the pharmaceutical manufacturers, and the FDA decided to charge the National Academy of Science in doing a project to research whether compounded bioidentical hormones, which again had gained enormous popularity in the United States, were safe and efficacious. And interestingly enough, they're only allowed to ask, they're not allowed to meddle in the process. They tasked the National Academy of Science, they funded the National Academy of Science, and I sat in front of 12 doctors and PhDs, and I got nervous, as did some of my colleagues, because I had already examined the credentials. And it looked like, as one of our compounding pharmacists in the United States, way up there in A4M, you know her well. I won't mention a name in case you'd rather I didn't. When I talked to her on the phone prior to that invitation, she said, "This is a setup, David." And I went, "No,
That's the way the game works.
they wouldn't do that." No.
That's
Well,
the
it
way the
was,
game
and
works. The sad part is that the public has been misled to believe that the guys at the top are working in their best interest, but the guys at the top are not always working at their best interest. A lot of people at the top are put there, are bought and paid for, and the game, the narrative is written before the words are ever spoken.
Yes, in
that's what it
spite of
turned out
it,
to be.
yeah, in spite of Dr. Rosensweet's stellar presentation, I listened to it live, and I was so impressed. In spite of that, and some other very good presentations at that committee, they came to the conclusion that compounded bioidentical hormones were not safe and effective. Pretty much the authority that the FDA has to give to drugs that go through their system. Of course, they haven't gone through that system. So it's given the FDA some ammunition now to use against compounders, to use against physicians who choose to use bioidentical hormones for their patients in individualized dosage forms. So then we come to the take charge guy here. What happened after that?
Well, a pharmacist and I, dear pharmacist, you know him well, Jim Herntzer, and I took a long walk around Washington after we testified in front of that committee, and we knew what was happening, and we decided to lay the groundwork for an effort to see if we could, and we're big tent. I don't care that Premarin and Prempro, women who took Premarin and Prempro, they did great. They, instead of having more risk, they had less risk for breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke. The field, there's so many fields in medicine, advanced so amazingly, right down to the individualization that can take place when you have a tremendously knowledgeable healthcare professional in the world of bioidenticals. You can individualize it woman to woman, and this is the great advantage for compounding, and that's irreplaceable. There's no way around it. You couldn't manufacture the numbers of permutations and computations around the prescriptions that are needed to individualize for each individual woman. Well, sorry, Carol, I'm wandering a little bit there. So we started laying the groundwork to put together everyone who would join us possibly to prevent what we anticipated the FDA was going to do. And they gave themselves the tools to do it. They're in place. And I must say to all physicians and women in the United States and men that we could lose these in a blink of an eye, because they've got the mechanism. They could put these bioidentical hormones on a list called too difficult to compound. And the mechanism when they're the easiest thing in the world to compound.
Yeah, can you bake a cake?
Yeah.
As long as you have
And
the
so,
proper tools for measuring and blending.
Since the Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine got started 30 years ago, and I've been at this for longer than 30 years, it's been an uphill battle, trying to defend the physician's right to be able to practice independently, trying to defend the patient's right to choose the medication and choose the health care that they feel is best for them. It's exactly that the bureaucracy believes that they own you. They own you down to the molecules of your body. They own you down to your genetics. They own you down to the individual atoms in your body, and that you have very little say in the matter. And it just gets a little worse every year. We've seen this happen so abundantly clear with the recent pandemic, but the compounding pharmacy issues were just a preview to what was coming. So, how do you think? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Is there any way to solve for this? Is there any way to reclaim your autonomy?
We believe there's a window here, and we have a coalition of 76 professionals, and the American Pharmacy Compounders, which is a rather substantial association. They're part of this coalition, as is We the Women. This is a women's group. The American Pharmacy Compounders are doing stellar work. They've invested a tremendous amount of money, over $1 million, in doing various things with the intention to mobilize the public. It was the mobilization of American women that stopped that estriol thing, or at least diverted it. Mm-hmm. And on our committee, there are physicians, compounding pharmacists, attorneys, lobbyists. And so we've got this tremendous experience, and it's exciting because we have a lobbyist, for example, who's really been 40 years in the world of compounding. And we all believe at this point that our biggest leverage is mounting the opinions of American women and men and going through varying phases. And right now, the infrastructure is set up in 3 different websites. I'd like to post those. Yes. Compounding.com, that's the APC, the American Pharmaceutical Compounders. CBHRTcoalition.org, and We the Women. And I think you'll find all 3 websites very interesting. And the most we hope to do, and especially my plea is to physicians who are treating patients with compounded bioidentical hormones, to start notifying your patient base that we could lose these. And as physicians and healthcare providers and nurse practitioners and PAs, if you have any caring about this, now we've got the infrastructure for you to mobilize. And we're focusing our attention on Congress. And we're hoping to be able to get in to do what was successful in the past with estriol, because what we hear from the lobbyists is one thing Congress people do not like is they have got a very unhappy constituency. And we're hoping to mobilize millions, and we'll go right down to the initial. You can just write an email to your congressperson right now by going through any of our websites, but they'll all lead to the APC, We the Voters' Voice. And so you'll be able to write an email to your congressperson. It'll be shunted to the proper 3 that represent you. And also we'll have a national call-in day. We'll have a march on Washington. We're now looking, and oh my goodness, if any of you know any opinion leaders. We have opinion leaders, a very famous one who's interested in this, but we need the biggest. Oh my goodness, Oprah, if you are listening, wouldn't that be? And Ron, you know so many major players. It's time for them to step forward, because we want to get the word out and make a movement towards Congress and let them know that this is a big deal. And to let them know, and this is something I'm planning in the works, that sooner or later, as a physician, I've treated people from birth to their last days on earth. And I can tell you what happens in your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And it is not pretty. And a very large percentage of people wind up in assisted living facilities and nursing homes. And you know what? Their life, your life, is going to matter as much to you then as it does right now. And this can, 99% of you, 95% of you do not have to do this.
That's
and hormones
exactly
are the
right.
vanguard.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. We only have another 2-3 minutes left, and I want you to tell us you're pushing 80 now, David, correct?
I'm 79, yeah.
Okay, so that's you've been around long enough to see what works and what doesn't. What works? Give me your 3 top choices for anti-aging besides diet and exercise.
Well, I put compounded bioidenticals at the absolute top. And then, my God, the list is long. There's nutritional supplements. There's all kinds of stuff at the leading edge. There's hyperbaric oxygen. There's just a long list. And you go to A4M and there's
But what have you seen that has been like truly miraculous besides compounded hormone replacement therapy, which I agree with you entirely. I've seen people turn their lives around from that.
Well, I turned my focus 25 years ago away from my holistic practice, but one of my favorites was intravenous high-dose vitamins and minerals.
Mhm.
And, when people are ill, there was a variety of things that we could use, including the oxidative therapies that I really loved. And then you name the basics. And I think the biggest one of all is acquiring information, tools, and support to find our way home to our true life, where we can love and have fun and laugh and have a successful economic life and raise our families. I think that's the core of it. And Ron, you know so much more about the details of the, you're the one who needs to answer what's your favorite, because
people are tired of listening to me. They want to hear from real experts like yourself.
Well, for men and women, I say it starts with compounded bioidentical hormones. Do you want to retain your sexuality? Do you like your vagina and your penis? Things like that. Do you like making out and enjoying a vibrant sexual life and a vibrant life? Go for those hormones. They're at the backbone of, go for compounded bioidenticals. You need the expertise. You don't want to deal, and this is what I would like to tell Congress people. When you turn to hormones, you're going to want the very best. You're not going to want the inferior stuff that's out there that doesn't work and isn't inclusive enough. And you're going to find your way to compounded bioidenticals, and they could be taken away from you. You could be prohibited from using them. So save them.
That's the important thing about having compounded pharmacy and competent compounding pharmacists and bioidentical hormones, because the body is not one size fits all. Our identities and our metabolism are as unique as our fingerprints, are as unique as the striae in our eyes, are as unique as the as the shape of your nose, your nostril. And everybody's different, and everybody needs a slightly different approach. And so personalized medicine and medicine that is customized to the individual is the difference between being treated like a human being and treated like a barnyard animal. And if you look at people who are treated like human beings, they tend to live longer. They have happier lifespans. They're much more youthful and creative. And the amazing thing is when you come to an A4M conference and you look at the doctors and the scientists and the lay people in the audience, and every time I get some academician from one of the major universities who comes up on stage to speak with us, who's never been exposed to this, their comments are they're always the same. They say, this can't be an audience of doctors, they're too young. And they're absolutely right. Our audience appears and acts and performs 10, 20, sometimes 30 years younger chronologically than they are, biologically than they are chronologically. They have a lot less miles on their odometer because of bioidentical medicine, because of customized healthcare and precision medicine and anti-aging medicine. And so, Dr. Rosensweet, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us today. I hope you'll be back again in the future. And again, for our audience, what are those websites?
Yes, they're compounding.com, cbhrtcoalition.org, and wethewomen.us.
Okay, we'll get this posted too, so people can also read it. And I'd also like to mention that practitioners can share these websites, and I believe it's the APC one, compounding.com, where we're collecting patient stories. Practitioners or the patients themselves can go there, and please do. We have to show Congress that this is as effective as we already know. They don't all know, some of them might know, but it's an important thing that you can do that will just cost a little bit of time and energy and is so important. So we'll post these as well. If you haven't gotten it from the video, we'll post it.
Well, I want to thank you both for being on Immortality Now for the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. I'm Dr. Ron Klatz, wishing you a long, healthy, happy, and productive lifespan. God bless you all.